Hello, today is a depressing day for NBA DFS with just one game on the slate. That means no contest for us. Hello once again, I'm Big Italy 42, welcoming you to the Daily Fantasy Cafe podcast. Since there's no contest, since there's no games, still going to bring you a podcast. I'm going to do some recaps of last night and look ahead towards tomorrow just a little bit. And last night, the big tournament we were talking about, $1 million prize pool, $100,000 to first place. The Mega Slam, first place went to winning 247. His lineup, give you the rundown here real quick to see what you should have done and what I should have done to win $100,000. Jeremy Lin, pretty chalk play there. A lot of people riding him. He was playing well. Did about what he did 2 games ago in a solid matchup last night against Minnesota. Trey Burke, obviously injuries going around in Utah. That was a solid pick. He went up 34 points. James Harden, don't need to explain that one to you. Lou Williams went for 22.9. Was a fine play at 4,700. 9.7% owned. The difference here was Jonas Valanciunas. My name is Jonas. 0.9% owned. Went for 28.4 for the top dog here. Paul Millsap at just 5.3% owned. Went for 51.7. And Trevor Ariza at 6.2% owned. Went for 44.3. Throw in Andrew Wiggins at 46.2. And Nerlens Noel at 49. And that is your recipe for $100,000. So congratulations to the big winner. And hopefully next time, it's you, it's me, it's one of us. And that was a breakdown there of that for you there. And last night's slate, a lot going on. It was a huge 13-game slate, as you know. A lot of people, including myself, kind of got burned by the blowout by the Spurs over the Thunder. I'm not complaining too much, obviously, being a Spurs fan. It was a pretty ugly game. Spurs ended up winning by 39 points. And Enes Kanter had himself a fine game. He was a guy I targeted quite a lot. Once again, talked about him on the podcast yesterday. And he had himself a fine game. However, with the game flow, the Spurs were up by 21 points at halftime. Kind of really got out of hand. Only played 22 minutes. 16 and 10, though. Double-double there. And Russell Westbrook with 16.7 assists, 4 rebounds, 2 steals, 4 turnovers in 26 minutes. And for the Spurs, no surprise that there was a whole lot of spread-out wealth. Tony Parker was the top play there. 21, 6, and 6 with 3 steals. Kawhi Leonard had a monster first half. 14, 5, and 5. A steal and a block. But none of these guys played a lot of minutes. In fact, the only players to play over 25 minutes for the Spurs were Tim Duncan at 27 and Tony Parker at 28. So that was a thing that burned a lot of people. And Clippers beat the Knicks by 31. No surprise there. Kind of par for the course, what we expected there. Some other interesting things. You've got Chicago with their big comeback against Toronto, led by Jimmy Butler's late resurgence. He had a poor start to the game. A slow start, I'll say, not a poor start. Shot 7 for 8 from the field. Ended up with 23 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists. So solid game for him there. And on the Toronto side, we saw Grievous Vasquez get off to a killer start. Fast out of the gate. Ended up with 22, 3, and 2. So a solid game there. But that late surge by Chicago, 39-21 the fourth quarter kind of did it. The Cleveland Cavaliers. Kevin Love looks like he's finally back. 10 for 13 from the field, 22 and 10, a plus 23 last night. The Cavs had their way with the Grizzlies. This game wasn't close at all going into the fourth quarter. They ended up winning the game by 22 points. Impressive performance there. Really no bright spots on the Grizzlies side there. Elsewhere, you had the Lakers getting by Minnesota in overtime. I already touched on a couple of those guys. Sacramento, in the final game of the night, beat Phoenix. DeMarcus Cousins, 24 and 11. That was a solid line for him. Obviously nothing near his 76ers numbers he's been putting up. But, I mean, you can't have that weak front court every time. And the interesting thing here was Marcus Morris played just 26 minutes despite the fact that Brandon Knight did not return. So, not sure if that's a sign of things to come. He was a guy that I kind of kept out of my lineups because I wasn't sure if Brandon Knight was going to come back or not. So, that's a situation I'm going to be monitoring moving forward, seeing how many minutes he gets. But a very productive 26 minutes, 7 for 11 from the field, 19 points, 3 rebounds. So a solid performance on his end there. Dwayne Wade, I won't say a late scratch, but a later in the day scratch. I mean, we knew well before tip-off that he wasn't going to play. What we didn't know is that Michael Beasley wouldn't be starting. Originally listed in the starting lineup, then Henry Walker was listed in the starting lineup. Michael Beasley, popular value play. I was on the bandwagon, not too proud to admit it. Wish it hadn't happened, but with that Wade news out, we've seen Beasley have a little bit of upside. So he was a guy slotted in there, real cheap at small forward, but really struggled. Just 14 minutes, 6 points, a rebound, assist, a steal, 2 blocks, a turnover, 3 fouls. So just a terrible performance by him. But led by Goran Dragic and Udonis Haslem. 12 and 12 for him down low. And they beat the Celtics without Dwayne Wade. They were a big underdog in this one. So impressive win for the Heat. One they really needed in this playoff race. And a pretty devastating loss for the Celtics there, considering the Heat were missing not only Dwayne Wade, but Hassan Whiteside as well. So that's your recap from last night. I'm going to go ahead and give you a little look ahead to tomorrow's action on Friday. 13 games again, like we had last night on Wednesday. So as you know, Wednesdays, Fridays, usually the bigger slates, and some pretty nice action. Of course, you got your $25 slam, $275,000 in the prize pool. Go ahead and take a look at a couple of early targets for you. You've got Detroit at Orlando. Obviously, Greg Monroe's status up in the air for this one. But you like to think that Andre Drummond and Nikola Vucevic are both going to have themselves some chances to have big games, especially if Monroe sits out. Neither one a great defender, both solid rebounders, decent offensive players. Obviously, Vucevic, the much better offensive player. And you're going to be, once again, if Greg Monroe sits out, once again, I will be looking at Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I was high on him this past week, and he did not disappoint at all. In fact, 20 or more real points in 4 of his last 5 games. The guy's on fire, getting more shots with Monroe out. He's a guy I'm going to be targeting a lot. Clippers at Philly, going to be ugly. Obviously, no spread for this one yet, but I can't imagine targeting a whole lot of guys in this one. Clippers are going to take care of this one pretty easily, I'd like to think. You've got Charlotte at Washington. Kemba Walker was a guy I was high on yesterday. Really, really disappointed. Should be a nice battle between he and John Wall tomorrow night. And we'll see with some injury news. We thought Al Jefferson wouldn't play last game. He ended up playing. Cody Zeller, once again, sat out. Chris Humphries was out. So not a main target for me here. Miami at Atlanta should be another fairly low total. You can look at a guy like Paul Millsap playing well. You've obviously got DeMarre Carroll there at small forward. He's sitting there at a fair price. He's a fine cash game play. Not investing much else into this one. Cleveland at Brooklyn. We've seen Cleveland and Brooklyn both struggle down low. Brook Lopez is absolutely on fire right now. This dude is in fuego. 54, 41, 37, and 65 fantasy points on FanDuel's last 4 games. At least 26 real points in each game. So he's expensive, but he's going to be on my radar. Then you're also looking at some other guys. You've got J.R. Smith, 30 or more fantasy points in 2 straight games. He's fairly priced around the industry. Kevin Love, coming off that big game, now listed at $7,300 on FanDuel against a weak Brooklyn frontcourt. So he'll be a guy I'll be looking at. Maybe a popular play coming off one big game. Obviously some risks there, but I do like him. Next up, we've got Boston at New York. And this one's going to be interesting. It looks like Lexi Shved is actually going to be out 2 to 3 weeks with a fractured rib. The lone bright spot for the New York Knicks this year, now going to miss some time. So if there was any further down to go from here, then that's the way they're going. It's going to be pretty ugly. Langston Galloway, Shane Larkin, the guys that are going to be taking over the bulk of the responsibility at the point there. But Galloway, 14 fantasy points in 40 minutes last game against the Clippers. And Shane Larkin, 9 fantasy points in 30 minutes. So 70 combined minutes there and less than 25 total fantasy points. So really an ugly situation. It's going to come down to if you want to battle and try to peg which one of these Boston guys is going to have production, but I'm not touching it. Isaiah Thomas came back for the Celtics last game. 1 fantasy point, 4 points, 3 turnovers in 20 minutes. So I'm going to need him to see more minutes, get some consistency before I'm going to be targeting him. Lakers at Toronto. We know about this bad Lakers front court, but you've got guys like Ryan Kelly and Tarek Black. Ryan Kelly, 31 and 27 fantasy points his last 2, and Tarek Black, 24 and 22. So with Carlos Boozer and Jordan Hill now sitting out for a few games, that's an interesting spot for them. I mean, these guys are going to have more minutes. Ed Davis, I mean, he's the dark horse here. I mean, he's the guy that, great point per minute guy, but just not getting minutes. Still not getting minutes, even with those other 2 guys out. Can't trust him. And he only played 22 minutes last game. So Sacramento at New Orleans, 2 of the top dogs on the night Anthony Davis, DeMarcus Cousins going at it. Maybe not exactly head-to-head, but they'll probably see some time on each other as well. And this is going to be a really great battle between those two guys. And I'm excited to see some huge fantasy point production out of those two. But on a 13-game slate, I'm going to need to see what kind of value opens up before I'm going to be targeting either of them in my lineups. Minnesota at Houston. We know how bad Minnesota is down low. We know how bad Minnesota is against every other position. And Dwight Howard finally made his return. 16 minutes as advertised by Kevin McHale. And he had 16.4 fantasy points. So he had himself a fine game. Seems that he's going to be on a minutes limit for the time being. And rightfully so. And Minnesota, once again, a ton of uncertainty. Justin Hamilton, after missing 4 games, did make his return. He was available to play. And he finished with 4 points and 4 rebounds in a whopping 9 minutes. So not a guy I'm looking at there either. Nikola Pekovic, we'll see if he sits out as well. If he sits out, Gorgie Jang, not a great play in a tough matchup against Dwight Howard, but you could look at him. He's not a guy I'm going to be targeting a ton. I mean, his last couple of games, real disappointing production. And it's going to be a tough matchup, at least for him, while Howard's out there. Guys that are really playing well. Andrew Wiggins finally putting it back together. 20 or more fantasy points in 3 of his last 4. Or 20 or more real points, I should say. So he's finally starting to put it together, getting his offensive game going. Trevor Ariza, Mr. Reliable here. I mean, he's just 7 of his last 9 games. He has at least 30 fantasy points, including 44 in his last game. He's a guy you're always targeting. Definitely going to be looking that way. Golden State at Memphis. You've got the usual suspects in this one, but I'm not targeting this one too much. Memphis is a solid defensive team. Golden State is a solid defensive team. I think this one could be kind of a stay away. I mean, a lot of concentrated value there. But one guy we'll be looking at. Weak spot for Memphis has been the shooting guard position. And Klay Thompson, 18 minutes his first game back, 25 last game. Should see near a normal workload. This time at 6,800. Nice discounted price for him on FanDuel. So definitely looking that way. Dallas at San Antonio. Rematch from a couple days ago. And the one guy who has really been crushing the Spurs this season, has had some of his best performances of the seasons against the Spurs. And this is not just because of his last game. Monte Ellis, 48 fantasy points, 38 real points last time against the Spurs. I'd like to think the Spurs will probably be keying on him. Maybe he'll see some Kawhi Leonard. But, I mean, he has just had the Spurs numbers this year. So definitely look at him. Utah at Denver. This is a mismatch if I've ever seen one down low. Utah with their dominant bigs, Derek Favors, Rudy Gobert, against the Denver front court, who has been an easy target to pick on recently. And, man, Derek Favors, 41, 43, 44 his last couple games. Just dominating. Rudy Gobert, at his price tag, getting expensive. And he did have a huge game once again against Minnesota, but followed it up with a 12-10 against Portland, which for most players is great. But at his price tag now, going to be hard to play him right there. And on the Denver end, you've got guys like Danilo Gallinari, really expensive once again. And he left with a shoulder injury last game. So if he sits, maybe see some extra shots for a guy like Randy Foye, maybe some Will Barton. Remains to be seen if he's going to play in the next game. Last game on the docket here, Portland at Phoenix. Got some interesting spots here. You've got Eric Bledsoe, and he's got significant upside, but he also doesn't have a very high floor. Floor right around 20 to 25 fantasy points. Really expensive in this matchup. Not sure I'm going to be going that route. And Brandon Knight sat out once again. Maybe he comes back in this game. Maybe he doesn't. Really remains to be seen there. Really tough situation for him. And Nicholas Batum, he sat out last game. He has sat out 2 games in a row now. And then you've got LaMarcus Aldridge, who returned last game. I mean, this guy is Superman. Getting injuries to hands, no matter what. I mean, the guy's fighting through it. He's playing. Just 27.8 fantasy points in a tough matchup last game. But, man, this guy, he is the Brett Favre of the NBA now. The guy's tough. So definitely look his way if you're looking to pay up in a tournament, but not a cash game play for me at his price and due to his injury. So I know it was a shorter version today. Kind of wanted to give you some recaps from yesterday, give you something for today, but a look ahead to tomorrow. So enjoy your NCAA tournament tonight, and maybe we'll see an upset. Maybe we'll see Bob Huggins continue to own John Calipari. I'm leaving this little nugget with you. Bob Huggins, 8-2 versus John Calipari. I'm checking out. I'll see you guys tomorrow.